Barbarians are a standard archetype across all sorts of different tabletop role-playing games. But how can you make one in Savage Worlds? I was personally challenged by Peter over at Tales from Elsewhere to make a barbarian in my system of choice, which obviously is going to be Savage Worlds, as part of his Get Barbaric challenge. In this challenge, he is asking game designers to go ahead and make a barbarian archetype character in their system. Now, like most games, there is a lot of different ways that you can make a barbarian in Savage Worlds. But for this video, we're going to try to make the most basic and standard barbarian that we can. To show how versatile the system is, I'm only going to be focusing on using the core rulebook for Savage Worlds. Once we create the character, we're also going to advance them up to the seasoned rank, so that everyone can get an understanding of what I would do with this character going forward. Now, the first thing you usually do when you create any character is deciding on your race. Just because I want to make this video a little bit simpler and not focusing on race creation rules or all the different kinds of races that you can have, we're just going to make this character a standard human. Next, I like to start with hindrances. Hindrances are the flaws of your character. They also have certain benefits, but they are optional. The first benefit is just to help you roleplay your character. The hindrances give your character a little more depth, and then it gives you a little more understanding of who your character is. Additionally, when you roleplay your hindrances well, Savage Worlds encourages the game masters to reward you with bennies, which are the game's meta currency, and they allow you to re-roll as well as give you additional benefits. Additionally, hindrances give you points that you can then spend on other things for your character, such as edges, attribute bonuses, or skills. Major hindrances are 2 points, and minor hindrances are 1 point. However, you can only benefit from up to 4 points of hindrances. Now, looking through the hindrances, there was a few that jumped out to me. Because I'm going for a very standard or very stereotypical kind of character, I'm going to go with mean as one of my minor hindrances, impulsive as one of my major hindrances, and illiterate as another minor. Impulsive gives your character a role-playing hindrance, which says that your character basically doesn't think before they act. They just go ahead and do the first thing that comes to mind, and because the kind of character we're playing means that it's probably going to be, we're going to fight it out immediately. You can probably guess what illiterate does, but to spell it out, it's a pun somewhere in there. To spell it out, though, you can't read or write. Mean, also kind of self-explanatory in that your character is just mean. They're not very nice. However, this does give you a mechanical hindrance as well in that you get a -1 to all your persuasion rolls. Now, the next thing I like to look at is my background edges. Edges are the way that your character gains particular abilities. Because Savage Worlds is a classless system, they're usually defined by the skills and abilities that they have. A lot of the edges or abilities also have particular requirements in order to take them, like having a fighting of a d6, or maybe a strength of a d6, or a spirit of d8, those kind of things. And I always start with the background edges because, generally speaking, these are the backgrounds to your character. It explains who they are as you create your character. And because of that, they generally aren't available after character creation. Now, some of them you can take as later advances if your GM allows, but generally speaking, this is the best time to take them. Now, the defining edge for a barbarian is going to be the Berserk edge. Berserk says that immediately after you suffer a wound or a shaken result, your hero must make a smarts roll or go berserk. Something to note is that you can voluntarily fail this check if you'd like to. Going berserk has the following effects. First, Fury. The character's strength increases a die type, and every melee attack must be a wild attack. In Savage Worlds, any character can make a wild attack with a melee weapon. Wild attack gives you a +2 to your fighting roll, a +2 to your damage roll, but it makes you vulnerable until your next turn. Vulnerable means that any action performed against you gets a +2 bonus. Additionally, while furying, they cannot use any skills that require wit or concentration. However, they specifically call out that this means you could make threats and use intimidation. Additionally, when berserk, they are enraged. Adrenaline and rage fuel the berserker's muscles, adding +2 to your toughness. That means it's going to take more damage to hurt us going forward. Additionally, when going berserk, you ignore 1 level of wound penalties. In Savage Worlds, we don't have hit points. Instead, we have wounds. Every wound gives you a cumulative -1 to all your rolls. The third ability you get when you're berserking is you get Reckless Abandon. This is not really an ability, more of a penalty. Anytime you roll a critical failure on your fighting check, which is a 1 on your skill die and 1 on your wild die, you hit a random target within range for the attacker and not the intended target. Now, after 5 rounds of berserking, you then take a level of fatigue. And for 10 rounds, you get another level of fatigue and you end your berserk. There's 2 important things to note about this particular piece of the edge. 1, fatigue is not ignored, and fatigue gives you an additional -1 penalty like wounds do. Additionally, once you take 3 levels of fatigue, you are incapacitated, and this particular ability does not say that you can't become incapacitated from it. Now, it does say you can choose to end your rage by making a smarts at -2 roll. However, we're probably also going to try to undo a berserk at the end of every turn, just so that we can hopefully ignore that level of fatigue. Now, as a human, we don't get any sort of bonuses or extra abilities or starting skills, and instead, we just get one free edge, and we're going to take Berserk as that free edge. So what other background edges are we interested in? Well, when looking through the background edges, there was two that stood out to me. The first one was Brawny, and the second one was Brute. Brawny says that your size is +1, and you treat your strength as one die type higher when determining encumbrance, and your minimum strength to use armor, weapons, and equipment without a penalty. Brute allows you to connect athletics to strength instead of agility. In Savage Worlds, all skills are tied to one of the attributes. Whenever you want to increase a skill, it only costs 1 point if the linked attribute is a higher die type than the skill that you're trying to increase. If you want to increase your skill above the linked attribute, it takes 2 points to do so instead of 1. Now, Brute seems like a really fun edge, but I don't think it's what I'm looking for this character. Brawny definitely makes sense. However, Brawny has a Strength D6 and a Vigor D6 requirement. Now, all attributes start with a D4 in each. At character creation, you get 5 points to spend on increasing attribute dies. So let's go ahead and spend 2 points to make sure that our strength and our vigor yank the requirement for Brawny. Now, in order to take this edge, we had to spend 2 of our hindrance points to do so. So now we're down to 2 hindrance points that we can spend on increasing an attribute, or we can use those as 2 different skill points. All characters start out with a D4 in Athletics, Common Knowledge, Notice, Persuasion, and Stealth. Now we're playing a Barbarian, which means that we want to be good at fighting, and fighting is tied to agility. I want to be decent at fighting starting out, so let's go ahead and spend 2 of our attribute points, increasing our agility from a D4 to a D8. Starting out, we get 12 points to spend on skills. And I'm going to spend 3 points to go get it in a D4, and then increase it to a D6, and then to a D8. Now, before I spend too much time on other skills, I want to look at my attributes, and I would think I want to increase my Spirit to a D6. Spirit is what you use to unshake in combat. I'm not going to go into fully on how combat works because that would be a whole nother entire video, but it's an important thing to be able to do. Now, earlier we did talk about intimidation as a thing that we can do while we are in a berserk. So let's go ahead and take intimidation, and intimidation is tied to spirit. So we can take this as a D6. When I think about a barbarian, I think about them being from the wild and having to go out and survive. And so I think taking survival as a skill is a good option. Now, survival is tied to smarts, so we can only take a D4 in it, but still better than not having it at all. Now, I'd also like to be able to taunt other characters, so I'm going to take taunt as a skill, but because it's tied to smarts, again, we're only going to take it at a D4. I also imagine that barbarians are likely good with horses and are good at riding them, so let's go ahead and give riding at D6, and riding is tied to agility. So now we have 3 points left to spend on skills. I think the first thing I want to do is increase my athletics. I am a barbarian, I should be good at being athletic, and I have agility at D8, so it's pretty easy for me to get that higher up. Athletics is used for several things, but most notably, it's used for grappling, and it's used for throwing items. And lastly, not seeing many other options I would really like to take as a skill, I think we'll just increase our persuasion from a D4 to a D6, because we have a spirit of D6. Now this leaves us with 2 hindrance points to spend anywhere we want still. At character creation, we can use these to increase our attributes. However, during character progression, you can only increase your attributes once per rank, which is essentially every 4 advances. There are 5 ranks in Savage Worlds, which are Novice, Seasoned, Veteran, Heroic, and Legendary. Because we want to make sure that we can put out a lot of damage, I'm going to go ahead and increase our strength from a D6 to a D8. And that's where we'll spend those 2 hindrance points. Now that that's all done, we can go ahead and determine some of our other abilities, such as Pace, Parry, and Toughness. All characters start out with a 6 pace, unless otherwise noted in their character, and we're going to give it a D6 running die. Parry is equal to 2 plus half your fighting die and any other bonuses from weapons or shields. Because our fighting is a D8, our parry is going to be 6. Toughness is equal to 2 plus half your vigor die, plus any bonuses. Our vigor is a D6, so our base is 5, plus we get a +1 from being brawny, making our toughness 6. Parry is how hard it is to hit you, and toughness is how much damage you need to do to the character in order to do any damage at all. So next, let's go ahead and talk about some gear that we're going to give this character at character creation. The first thing we want to do is to give this character a nice big weapon to use because they are a barbarian. Now, technically speaking, this character could be played in any setting, any genre at all, but I think we definitely have a fantasy setting in mind. Because of that, let's go ahead and give him a greatsword. Now, greatswords have a D10 minimum strength requirement. However, because we have a D8 in strength and we have the brawny edge, we are allowed to get a D10 item with no penalties. And that's going to cost us 400 gold, but it'll be worth it for us. The damage is strength plus d10. Now, because of Berserk, our strength is going to be changing. So I'm going to leave this as strength plus d10 because that strength value is going to change during combat depending on if we're berserking or not. Now, in other games, a lot of barbarians are limited in the kind of armor they can use, and a lot of them have some sort of unarmored ability. In the core Savage Worlds, that's not the case. If you look at Savage Pathfinder, there is certain armors they cannot wear, but we're just using the core rulebook, so we're not going to find anything like that here. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the armor. Now, in the core rulebook, you start out with 500 credits, whatever the credits is, dollars, credits, coins, whatever. We already spent 400 of it on a greatsword, so let's go and take a look at the armor and see what kind of stuff we can get. Now, I recently made a full video on how armor works, which I'll link up here, so I'm not going to go over all this in detail. However, because of the way our character is, they could have up to D10 in armor, because we have a strength plus D8 and then the brawny edge as well. Meaning we could get full plate mail. Full plate mail costs a lot of money, and we don't have enough money to buy that. Looking over our options, we can really only get some thick leather jacket armor. This will give us a +2 to our toughness, but only to our torso. So what I'm going to do is mark our toughness as 8, and then in parentheses 2, mark that 2 of the toughness is coming from armor. This helps with things like armor piercing, or if you're completely ignoring our armor by hitting a different area of our body, like our legs or our head, then our toughness is only 6. And there we go. That is all the details of our character now created. At this point, let's go ahead and advance our character to the seasoned rank. The one edge I really want for this character at some point is the Frenzy edge. Frenzy says, as a limited action, a character with Frenzy may roll a second fighting die with any one of his fighting attacks for the turn. The extra die may be allocated to the same or different targets as he sees fit. Essentially what this says is I can hit 2 different enemies or the same enemy twice with 1 action of my fighting attack. Now we do meet the fighting requirement of a D8+, however, we don't meet the seasoned requirement for rank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at my character and say, you know what, when it comes to seasoned, I want Frenzy. Now I do know that one of these novice ranks, I do want to increase my vigor die from a D6 to a D8. Now because we did that, it means our toughness now goes to 9. So looking over all of our options, I think the other advance I want to do is to gain the Mighty Blow edge. Mighty Blow states that if your action card is a Joker, double the damage of your first successful fighting attack this round. For those who don't know, Savage Worlds uses a card-based initiative. At the beginning of every round, each player gets a card from a standard 54 card deck. Jokers are particularly special in that they give you a +2 to all of your rolls, including your fighting attacks, and +2 to your damage. Now we still have one more novice advance to do. Hey, Josh the editor here. Originally, I suggested this character should have strong-willed. However, strong-willed requires a spirit of D8, which we do not have. So instead, I'm going to suggest that we give this character Nerves of Steel, which allows us to ignore 1 wound penalty. This will stack with Berserker, so when the character is berserking, they'll actually ignore 2 points of wound penalties, which will be really good for them in multiple areas. So that's what we're going to do instead, Nerves of Steel. Back to the main video. And with that, we're done. This is how I would create a very standard barbarian in Savage Worlds. Tell me what you think. Tell me what kind of changes you would have made. This is not like the kind of character I would necessarily would make. I have a lot of other ideas of how I'd make particular barbarian characters, like a barbarian dwarf wielding 2 hand axes in each hand. I want to say thank you to Peter from Tales from Elsewhere for this Get Barbaric challenge. I hope you all had a great time. If you want to learn more about how to make characters in Savage Worlds, you can check out this video right here.